Just we'll let these folks join in.
Yeah, go crazy with powder. And the idea.
Okay, everyone, if you could please mute yourself. So as we get started on the presentation, we can avoid any feedback or background noise. That would be great. So Katie, I'm not sure how long your presentation is, but we'll we'll go through the presentation, then there'll be some time for question and answer at the end. So you want to go ahead and get started, Katie?
Yes, thank you very much.
No problem.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katie Perkins. I'm the project manager with the Corps of Engineers Baltimore District. Thank you for joining us tonight. Myself and our study manager, Amber Martello, will be providing about a 15-minute presentation, and then we'll have the remainder of the time to listen to your feedback and answer questions. This study is a partnership between the Corps of Engineers and the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. We restarted the study in April of 2021 with 100% federal funding. I will highlight that the funding covers the feasibility study only. We do not currently have any funds for design or construction. Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments is representing many of our stakeholders and partners, such as Arlington County, which is hosting the meeting tonight, and Fairfax County, which assisted with hosting a very engaged meeting on Tuesday evening at Bellevue Elementary School. Today, the main purpose is to share information about our study, provide updates on where we are currently, and to tell you about the initial findings that are included in the draft integrated feasibility report and environmental assessment that was recently released for public review. I will cover the study overview, purpose, and also the schedule. And then Amber will cover the details of the alternatives considered and the tentatively selected plan. And then we will wrap up and have plenty of time for questions. This slide shows the study area, which stretches 135 miles along the western shore of the Potomac River. The entire study area is in Virginia, and the extent in color shows an inundation from a Category 4 storm surge. So that forms the study area that we looked at. The purpose of this feasibility study is to reduce coastal flood risk to populations, properties, infrastructure, and environmental and cultural resources within this area. A feasibility study looks at
Katie, somehow you got muted by accident.
Oh, sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah. Continue on. You're good.
The feasibility study investigates the federal interest, the engineering feasibility, economic justification, and the environmental acceptability of the Corps of Engineers partnering with the local community and designing and potentially constructing flood risk management measures within the study area. Our specific objectives are looking at reducing the risk of coastal flooding to life safety, reducing economic damages, and reducing disruption of critical infrastructure, and improving the resiliency of critical infrastructure. This map shows the estimated flood inundation from a 1% annual exceedance flood event, which is often referred to as a 100-year flood. And this is estimated to be in approximately 2030. and it shows the inundation in the Greater Bellevue, New Alexandria area. The inset image on the right shows flooding of this region in Hurricane Isabel, which was in 2003. Also highlighted here in the yellow crosshatch is the 500-year or 0.2% annual exceedance event. And we also have an image that shows similar risk to the Arlington Water Pollution Control Plant located on 4 Mile Run. You can see here that the Arlington Water Pollution Control Plant is really at greatest risk for a 0.2 annual exceedance event, or the 500-year event. It's at higher elevation and pretty well above the 100-year event. So this mapping shows that this region is at risk for coastal storms. And the purpose of this study was to look at how can the Corps potentially partner with the local communities and try to reduce that risk. Are there any solutions that we could partner together on? I want to highlight the schedule. This is the overall study schedule, and the yellow highlights the public review period where we currently are. So the first year of the study, over the past year, we've been looking at different alternatives for potential flood risk management projects in the study area. And the draft report was released for public review at the end of May. At the public meeting on Tuesday, this past Tuesday, we got a lot of great feedback, and one overwhelming request was for an extension to the public review period. An extension has been requested, and we'll keep everyone informed on if that is granted and what the new public review end date would potentially change to. Once we receive public comments, we will incorporate them into our study and potentially revise the report. The agency decision milestone is one date that I would like to highlight. Amber is going to present next what we consider to be the tentatively selected plan for this study. But the key word here is tentative, and it does not become the recommended plan or of the Corps of Engineers until this fall, after we've worked extensively with the community and with our local partners. The study officially goes until March of 2024. And at that time, if design funding becomes available, a project could potentially be designed in 2024 to 2026. And then if construction funding was available and we had community and partner support, construction of any projects would likely take place in the late 2020s. So that just gives you a big picture. Before I turn it over to Amber, I did want to highlight a lot of the great feedback that we received at the meeting on Tuesday and some of the major themes that were brought up. We had much of the discussion focused on the Greater Bellevue and New Alexandria area and the proposed project, which Amber will go through. We did hear your concerns, and we're taking into account how a potential project would impact safety and the environmental effects in your neighborhood, the property values in your community. And also we heard your requests to have greater engagement with the National Park Service. So I just wanted to acknowledge those specific themes, and there were many other discussion points that were greatly appreciated. And I'll turn it over to Amber. We will go through the two alternatives, and then we will look forward to hearing any discussion and questions that you have. Thank you very much. And Amber, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Katie. Okay, so this list shows the final array of alternatives. Katie talked a little bit about the Arlington Water Pollution Control Plant and Bellevue, but I also wanted to walk through some of the other alternatives that were considered for the project. The figure to your right, the yellow star, shows the location of all the alternatives within the study area. Alternative 4 is a critical infrastructure plan. So in addition to including the Arlington Water Pollution Control Plant, we also looked at Reagan National Airport and doing a levee and flood wall out there, in addition to stop log closure structures. For alternative 5, there were 3 main focus areas. This is the flood wall and levee plan. In addition to the Greater Bellevue levee and flood wall, we also evaluated Alexandria, a deployable flood wall, and 4 Mile Run levee and flood wall, which is on the opposite bank along 4 Mile Run from the water pollution control plant. Alternative 6 was the non-structural plan, looking at inundation mapping. We evaluated 3 areas that could benefit from either elevating or looking at other structures, wet or dry flood proofing. We looked at Bellhaven, Old Town Alexandria, and Occoquan Bay. And then for alternative 8, this was more of an open-ended alternative in that we could have any combination of alternatives 4, 5, or 6, or components of those alternatives based on the economic evaluation that I'll talk to in a few slides. Next slide, please. So just to quickly discuss our structural alternative development, we did water surface elevation modeling and updated that from a previous study looking at coastal storms and sea level change through the year 2080. And we used an intermediate sea level rise curve, which is approximately 1.75 feet. Here you can think of level of performance as the top of the wall or levee, looking at it from an elevation standpoint. And we use the North Atlantic vertical datum of 1988. For Reagan National Airport and Arlington Water Pollution Control Plant, we evaluated a 0.2% annual exceedance probability or 500-year event for those 2 areas, which put us at a level of performance of about 14.3 feet NAVD 88. For Old Town Alexandria, 4 Mile Run, and Bellhaven, we evaluated a 100-year event or 1% annual exceedance probability, putting us at about 13.2 feet for Old Town Alexandria, just shy of 14 feet for 4 Mile Run, and 13 feet for Bellhaven. Next slide. So I know this is a busy table, but I just want to start with the top. This is the alternatives benefits rolled up. So this shows the alternatives that I spoke to on the final array of alternatives slide. And looking at alternatives 4, 5, and 6, you can see there those numbers are in red for column 4, the average annualized net benefits. How we compare alternatives is we compare the benefit to cost ratio, which is that final column, to see if we hit what we call unity or a 1.0 BCR or higher. The way that we choose an NED or National Economic Development Plan is having a positive net benefits and a benefit cost ratio over 1. So for alternative 8, which is that combination plan I discussed, the total economic cost is about $52.6 million, with average annualized net benefits of $450,000 and a benefit cost ratio of 1.3. The bottom table shows the breakout of the two plans that are being suggested to be carried forward in the study, and those are our Arlington Water Pollution Control Plan and Belhaven. That just shows the breakout of total economic cost and benefits and the benefit cost ratio for those plans separately. And then that bottom line shows the totals for the tentatively selected plan. Next slide, please. So just to reiterate, the components for these two plans are concrete eye walls and T-walls, pump stations, earthen levee, and stop log closures. The total economic cost of about $52.6 million does include a 45% contingency. This plan is, very early. We're very early in the study process, and there is still quite a bit of uncertainty and additional data gathering that needs to occur as we move forward. So that's why that contingency is high, and we will revisit that doing what we call a cost schedule risk analysis. As we gain more information, we will continue to discuss the risks as a team and then revise that cost estimate as the plan would move forward. Total damages reduced for the tentatively selected plan is about $66 million. And again, that provides a benefit to cost ratio of about 1.3. Next slide. Okay, so this image shows a concept for the Belhaven or Greater Bellevue area. The area in red there would be a proposed flood wall. There's about 5 closure structures there that are marked in yellow. There's also culverts and an earthen levee portion to the south, and also recommending an addition of 2 pump stations there for the east channel and the west channel. Next slide, please. Okay, this just gives kind of a concept level for the design, estimating about 5,600 feet of flood wall and about 400 feet of levee. And again, those 5 road closures that would be likely a temporary potential stop log closure or other temporary structure that would be placed when an event was going to likely to occur. The average wall or levee height is about 6 feet above existing ground. That is just the average. Further to the south, there is some area of higher ground, so the levee or a flood wall would be a lot lower than that 6 feet, but that's about the average for the entire reach. The top of wall and level of performance elevation is about 13 feet NAVD 88. And that picture to the right just kind of shows the overall concept and the structures that are located within the area. Next slide. This slide shows a concept for the Arlington Water Pollution Control Plant. The area there in red is a proposed flood wall, and then there's one closure structure at South East Street there to the southeast. Next slide, please. So the concept design for this structure is about 2,500 feet of flood wall with 1 closure. You can see on the drawing there the approximate heights from ground in each of those areas as you follow the natural topography of the area. And the top of wall or level of performance elevation for this structure is about 14.3 feet. And just a reminder, that's because we looked at evaluating the 500-year level of performance for this for a 500-year event because it's one of the critical infrastructure alternatives. Next slide. So this I wanted to highlight some of the impacts to the human environment that we've identified. There's definitely temporary impacts during construction, recognizing noise and recreation impacts, investigations to determine the presence of contaminated soils and cultural resources would occur during the design phase. Permanent aesthetic and recreation impacts could be realized in Bellhaven. Bellhaven culvert crossings, there's both permanent and temporary stream impacts. We're looking at about 2,500 square feet of permanent impacts, and then about 2,200 square feet of temporary stream impacts during construction. And there is, we're working through a draft mitigation plan. There is a copy of that within the report that was released, and we're going to continue those discussions as more information comes available. Next slide, please. So as Katie had mentioned, the public review, we did request an extension. So we're waiting to hear back on what the new date will be. So that 30 June date will likely change. That's the project website. So you can go there and download the report if you have not already done so. And there's both the feasibility report and environmental assessment, as well as all of the appendices. And then in addition to all of the great comments that we've received during Tuesday's meeting, and we'll discuss this evening, any additional comments are welcome at the email address provided at the bottom of the screen. Next slide. So I just want to thank everyone again. We'll leave the project website and project email up. We have about 25 comments we've received to date. So we're working through addressing those. And I'm going to turn it over at this point to Cynthia and open it up for further discussion. And I do see, Cynthia, that we've got quite a few comments coming in the chat. So we can start there. And then if folks want to use the raise hand function, we'll definitely call on people and let you come off mute and ask your questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Amber. And I will start off in the order as comments came in. And if for whatever reason your comment has already been addressed, I know our team is working on that as the presentation was ongoing. Feel free to let me know and we will just go ahead and go past that and on to the next individual. So we'll start with William Rising. William, has your comment been addressed or would you like to discuss that further at this time?
Yes, thank you. The first two questions have been addressed. I feel confident in that, although I am concerned about the amount of a leeway or area that needs to be cleared on either side of the wall. I understand it depends on the final design of the wall. My concern is because I am on Boulevard View, and this is going to be directly in front of my apartment. And I'm on the ground floor. So I am sensitive about flooding. And so, and I think, 6.5 foot wall, okay. But my last question, and I'd appreciate more clarification on this. So the National Park Service, doing it on the east side of the GW Parkway, which I believe would probably also ensure that the GW doesn't get shut down as a transportation and emergency vehicle corridor. I don't know where all the traffic will go if GW is under 6 feet of water, but can you tell us more about engagement with the National Park Service and why that's not the first alternative rather than we have this alternative, but now we're needing to engage with the NPS about, what they're willing to do, because it seems like it would be a lot easier to do it on the east side and probably more effective. But that's just my layman's view. Thank you.
So I can take that question. This is Amber. So I'll start off by saying, we did evaluate for that. The study has been ongoing for about 4 years. I know the original alignment was on the riverside of the parkway to also reduce flood risk to the George Washington Memorial Parkway, in addition to the community and residences. I know through various coordination efforts, it's been clarified to the Corps that the National Park Service does not want to either convey lands and wants to avoid any impacts to Park Service property or any of their infrastructure. So that was actually included within the report as a project constraint, and that's something that we've been working through and continuing to coordinate with them on that. So that's what actually changed the alignment from the very initial alternative that was developed back when the study first started in 2017. So we're going to continue that coordination, but that's kind of just a little bit more history of kind of how we got to the current alignment for the project.
Amber, thank you for that. If I can follow up,
Sure.
I know you can't really lobby, but I think many of us would appreciate appropriate contact information for who at the NPS we need to contact about this, because, you know, their infrastructure is going to be underwater. So, you know, and understandably, some of their infrastructure is going to be on the east side of whatever the wall is going to be, wherever it's going to be. I understand they're concerned about parking lots, et cetera, you know, but frankly, you know, that's public land, that's government land. And you know, and they also control the GW Parkway. And I'm kind of shocked that they're not interested in conveying this. And it sounds extremely uncollaborative and myopic on their part. So I'd appreciate any information that you could share, or anybody could share, about who we need to contact at the NPS about this. Thank you. I appreciate the history, and I'm glad to hear that that was the first alternative considered.
Yeah, Mr. Rising, this is Andrew Orlovsky. I'm a civil engineering chief with the Army Corps. One thing I'll also add is if we do construct the levee on the east side of the parkway, that doesn't necessarily mean we can just protect the parkway and keep traffic going, because we got to tie in the levee or flood wall into high ground. And it's very unlikely that there is any high ground on the east side of the parkway. So that would mean constructing closure structures at least 2 locations, north and south, on the parkway, which would shut down the parkway even if there was a high water event that even had the potential of rising up to the levee.
Yeah, thanks for that. I appreciate the clarification. The parkway would be closed in the event of a flood anyway, so whether it's closed by water or closed by a closure. Anyway, thanks very much. I appreciate it. I'll let other people continue. Thank you.
Did you have any, Amber, did you want to talk about the clearance on each side of the wall at all, or do you want me to take that?
I believe it was.
I believe we have a question. Oh, sorry about that, Amber. We have a question of that exact nature coming up in just a little here, Andrew. So maybe we'll table that until that comes up.
All right. I know that Mr. Rising had 2 questions here, so I just wasn't sure if we're going to answer them both at the same time or go to another one here.
My first 2 questions were answered in the chat, but there may be other people who want to clarify. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Deborah Hammer, have your question, or is your question, actually, you've got a couple here. Have they been responded to, or would you like to speak up at this time?
Yes, if you could address them, I'd really appreciate it. So I know you looked at some of the other strategies. Could you talk a little bit about why they were rejected? And also, what about restoring Dyke Marsh and how that would mitigate some of the potential high water events? How is that being addressed? And if other things are off the table, is it simply because of cost, or are there other factors?
So I'm not sure if Christina's on to speak to Dyke Marsh specifically, but and the mitigation strategies. But I'll just quickly mention the other alternatives that were looked at, because one of the questions from Tuesday's meeting was regarding looking at a storm surge barrier, which I know there was 2 different options looked at, and they were screened out early within the project due to environmental concerns. There were concerns that there would still be residual flooding associated with those. There was also hydrology concerns with looking at a storm surge barrier on the Potomac. And it was also a very significant cost as well. So all of those factors kind of factor into that. And then there was a third alternative that was a combination of a storm surge barrier and non-structural measures. But, it addressed some damages with elevating or flood-proofing homes, but again, didn't really address the objective for reducing flood risk within some of the low-lying areas within the study area. And I'll pass it over to Christina if she wants to, I think she's online, if she wants to talk about the mitigation strategies or dike marsh.
Sure. Hey, this is Christina May. I'm the biologist on this study. We did a few years ago worked with the National Park Service to come up with a plan to restore dike marsh. We originally wanted to restore those wetlands out to their historical footprint, but we were not able to do that. The state of Virginia would not allow us to restore those wetlands. So we had to, along with the Park Service, construct sills along the existing marsh boundary just to protect what, is existing now so it wouldn't have any further erosion. So yeah, one of our big constraints here is the state of Virginia just would not allow us to build out those wetlands. As far as mitigation strategies for our stream impacts for the Bellevue flood wall, we are planning to purchase mitigation bank credits to offset our stream impacts. So I hope that answers those questions.
Christina, I think there was a follow-up. Could you expand on what the concerns were from Virginia about marsh restoration? I believe it
Yes,
was
so
resource
there
trade-offs,
is, right? Sure. So the Potomac River in that area has submerged aquatic vegetation. And in order for us to build out those wetlands, we would have had to, impact that submerged aquatic vegetation. And Virginia really valued that community. So we could not impact that habitat.
Could you clarify when you last communicated with the Commonwealth about the SAV and the marsh restoration issue? I'm just curious because we reached out to see who the point of contact was at the Commonwealth currently, since there's been an administration change, and we don't think there is one. Do you guys have a point of contact currently?
I do at the Virginia Marine Resources Commission. So that's who I would contact, and that's who we worked with. And it's been several years, a few years now, since we worked on that. So, but I do have a point of contact for Virginia.
Several governments, I know.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing on the whole dike marsh, as far as actually restoring it rather than constructing the sills, which we are doing currently. One of the last meetings we had with the Virginia Marine before they issued the permit was that they were concerned about accretion of sediment within the area behind the sill. So I don't think it's going to be, I don't think they're going to be any more open to wetland creation behind the sill. Since last time we talked with them, they wanted to make sure that, not only are we not building anything, that no sediment deposits are going to occur on the other side of this, on the, land side of the sill naturally as well.
Thank you. And I believe that was the final portion of her question there. So we will move on. And I apologize if
I did just have one follow-up just more broadly about natural and nature-based features, and if you would consider adding more into the study, since this is very heavy on the seawalls, and ERDIC has done a really good job of providing guidance for how to integrate, oyster reefs in addition to wetland restoration, hydrologic restoration. There's a lot of different options there that aren't just concrete that, degrades as soon as you put it into the system.
Right. Yes. And we did look at a couple NNBF features. Unfortunately, the things we were looking at were not going to provide flood protection. So we could do ecosystem restoration, but it wouldn't provide the flood protection we needed because it's just not big enough. So we had to screen out the NNBF, unfortunately. I don't know, Andrew Orlovsky, if you've got anything to add to that, but.
This is Katie. I was going to add, yes, that NNBF were screened out as standalone alternatives, but that we are still open to incorporating them as complementary features to any potential structural solutions. Is that accurate, Amber?
Yes, that's, I believe, exactly what we stated within the report. I know some of the alternatives, and I believe it was Alexandria that got screened out. We did, I think the community had some plans for living shorelines and other measures that they were actually moving forward with. But I know that's still on the table if it would be add to the benefits for any of the other alternatives. Thank you.
Ms. Hammer, was that the end of your comment?
Yes, that was the, and I did have one additional question. And that was about infrastructure. You had mentioned wanting to support infrastructure. And we know that in Isabel, the pumping station failed and that frequently the storm sewers overflow in the Bellevue and River Towers areas. Is there any plan to update those?
There will obviously be new pumping stations constructed to deal with the appropriate amount of interior drainage behind this flood wall system. The other thing I will add is that many pump stations now have backup generators and any concerns with the design, with kind of increasing the redundancy and the resiliency of these pump stations to assure it doesn't fail during a flood will be taken into account during the design phase.
This is Dan Lovett. Also to that, we have not looked at the interior drainage evaluation process yet. The pump stations right now, we just know that they're going to be 2. So they're going to be much farther or much bigger, much larger than the ones that are now, or going to be able to pump out more water. So, but the internal drainage will be looked at, and what systems need to be updated will be shown on the plans.
And you're talking about the new station that's planned on River Towers property, not the existing stations that would be replaced, the one by the golf course or the one by the shopping center. Is that correct?
Yes, those 2 will become obsolete.
And they will not be replaced?
No.
And how will the one that's planned on River Towers property impact the people who live here, since those tend to be very loud? I mean, what would be the impact on the quality of life for the residents here?
Well, they're only going to turn on when there's a flood. And they'll be encased into a building as well. So it's not like they'll be open out there.
Thank you all. And in the interest of time, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the next individual to make sure we can give everyone their fair share here. And I apologize if I mispronounce his last name, Jason Papascoma, is that correct? Sir, has your question been addressed, or would you like to speak up at this time?
Hi, thanks. Yes, Jason Papacosma with Arlington. If the question was answered, I think it actually ties into my colleague Demetra McBride's question about sort of the combined probability. Demetra, do you want to say something while we have the mic?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Yeah, there is a situation, in the July 2019 storm, which granted was a historic storm, we had at least a couple of watersheds that the capacity system was just overwhelmed. And they were flooding extraordinary, levels of water down through what is really the, 4 Mile Run, our only main corridor for overland relief. So we had exceptional rises to the level and 4 Mile Run in a very, very short period of time. And I was just wondering if your analysis, where you get to the sea level rise and storm surge, was there any consideration if you have something like a tropical storm or a hurricane, God forbid, where you've got water being pushed up the coastline, but you could also have significant rainfall inland that is flooding down, a kind of convergence scenario where you've got water flowing downstream, and then you've got storm surge and sea level rise pushing upstream at the mouth of 4 Mile Run.
This is Syed here. We haven't done any interior drainage analysis yet. That will capture all on the rainfall related. And the July 9th event was mostly a rainfall event, right?
Yes.
And coastal elevations are much, much higher than, as you can see, the elevations are like in the water pollution control plan. Elevations are like 14.3. When the Hurricane Isabel elevation was like, which is the most high storm event from coastal that happened in this area, was about 9 feet. So it's significantly higher considering the analysis that we had done that shows basically that consider the different historic storm and also synthetic storms in the analysis to figure out what is the 100-year elevation or the 500-year elevation for this area.
Right. I was, and we don't have to belabor this point now. I want to be fair to other people who have questions, but I'm talking about a situation. And if you check NOAA really calculated quite into some level of detail what the rise was in the level of 4 Mile Run near the bottom, the 4 Mile Run, the lower main stem, in probably in that particular storm in less than 40 minutes. So I'm just wondering, it's one thing to say that the calculation for sea level rise and storm surge is higher, but I'm just worried about the energy and dynamic of two levels of flow basically conflicting with each other at that area.
If you are if you have the information, would you mind sending it to us? If you are looking at specific information from NOAA, then we can review that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. And moving on, we have Grace, does not have a last name indicated. Ma'am, would you like to speak up at this time?
Yeah, hi, sorry. Grace Tucker with Environmental Defense Fund. I had asked a couple of different questions and parts of them have been addressed already, and I appreciate that in the chat and in the conversation. But I did also just want to point out that looking only at storm surge for these studies is really limited because it does not, by not taking into account future climate impacts, including the increased frequency, intensity, and duration of precipitation, which definitely impacts Northern Virginia, as well as sea level rise and looking at storm surge exclusively, we just don't actually get a complete picture. And that has ripple effects throughout all of the modeling, which is definitely a significant concern. And we also would just, as I said before, would prefer to see additional natural and nature-based features incorporated because of all of the additional co-benefits they provide, as well as the growth potential and just the better longevity of nature-based solutions compared to concrete solutions. And I understand that there are certain elements that just will not provide the same kind of flood protection, but doing hybrid solutions is really preferable for a lot of reasons because of the habitat benefits, environmental benefits for humans and wildlife, and the ecotourism potential as well. There's a lot of different benefits that really should be considered here beyond just to be honest, the way that the course cost benefit analysis is structured. And I would also just echo, I'm really happy that folks on Tuesday requested an extension of the public comment period, considering that there are only 2 meetings this week. And the last time there were any public meetings about this was in 2019. And a lot has changed since then, just for the public with COVID. I think additional notice and communication around this project and the fact that it is happening is really critical, and would really appreciate if y'all were able to host additional meetings, particularly directly in the impacted communities that you're highlighting here in the study, to make sure that you're getting well-rounded public input. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Grace. Is there anyone on the team who would like to add any context to the initial portion of this? Okay, we will move on. Mr. Dan Lovett, has your question been addressed, or would you like to speak up at this time?
No, I was answering questions.
Oh, Dan. You'll have to excuse me. Let's keep going. Andrew is also with us. Grace, it's another portion to this. Did we already address this for you, Grace?
Sorry, I've lost track of my own questions. Which one are we on now?
We are down to nature and nature-based features that would be considered about the project and ERDIC
thank you.
Implementation.
Yeah, and my question about Virginia was also answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. Just scrolling down here, making sure. Deborah Hammer, I believe this is another question of yours. Did we address this during your time a little while ago?
Did. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Demetra McBride, would you like to speak up at this time, or has your question already been addressed by the team?
I'm sorry, my mic was off. You know, we're probably going to follow up with, I believe his name is Saeed, but for the time being, we'll just table the question for an exchange of further information.
Very good. Holly Izimala, I hope I did not mispronounce that. I apologize if I did. Have we addressed your question, or would you like to speak up at this time?
I haven't heard from anyone yet, but to be honest, I'd rather hear from River Towers Condominium. Looks like they have their hand up, and I know we have a meeting at 7:30, so.
I believe they are on the line. In fact, whomever is representing the condominium, would you like to go ahead and speak up now? We'll give this a minute in case they're on mute.
Yes, we are unmuting. Yes,
go right ahead.
This is Linda Patterson of River Towers. I was just wondering, we were wondering, when you did the study, did you do a walkthrough of the area, or did you just use satellite to determine where your boundaries were? The reason I'm asking this question is because based on the drawings, and as I look, I noticed that the wall also cuts off our dock area at one end of our building. Is the drawing, am I correct, or is or are your studies going to make adjustments to those types of situations?
Again, this is Dan Lovett. Yes, we are aware of the dock and a wall would not be placed across there. It would be a closure. So the closure will remain open and it would just be closed in the event of a storm.
Okay. I know you were also talking, okay, so, but the drawing's not clear there. So would you be making that more clear?
Absolutely, we can clarify that.
Okay. Also, I know you were just talking about the pumping stations. What does that look like? I know that it's going to only be loud during the time that there would be a flood, but what does that actually look like now that it's going to be on our property?
Well, we have closures, these pump stations in all the cities up and down the coast. And most of the times they are in towns. They are enclosed in a building. So inside the building, they are pretty loud. But on the outside, I don't see it as too much of an issue, but later on down the road, could we get a study done to make sure we're not with the decibel levels? That could be looked at, absolutely, and find out what would be relative like for a road or something like that. If a sound barrier need to be done, but I have not seen one done in any of the other projects.
Okay, are they tall? Are they, I'm trying to check to also make sure, are they an eyesore?
Yeah. They're just a rectangular building. They're probably usually around 15 feet tall. And they're usually about 15 to 20 to 25 feet wide, depending upon the size and how many pumps there are. But that's usually about, it looks kind of like just depending on the material, usually it's either block or brick, and they're about that size.
Okay.
Does that give you a better idea? Maybe what I can do is try to send you a picture of one at a different location so you'll have an idea.
Okay, all right. Okay, that was my questions. Thank you.
How much of our land is going to be taken? I know, I can't use
Another person was mentioning that 32% of our land is being taken. Is that about correct?
That's a question. Do we have someone from real estate on this that's here today? Katie?
Yeah, this is Craig Holmesley. I could give you general answers, but I couldn't really tell you percentages of various properties at this stage as to what's being taken.
Okay. All right. Well, we thank you. We have no more questions.
Okay, wonderful. Moving on, I believe the next question here or comment comes from Alexis Abernathy. Are you online and would you like to speak
Yes,
up
I
at
am.
this time?
Yes, I am. You mentioned earlier that you have done some coordination with the National Park Service. And I was, and I'm assuming that that was because of federal regulations. And I'm wondering under what federal regulations was that? Was that under NEPA? Was it under 106? Was it under ARPA? And was there any type of, is there any, can we request copies of that coordination and consulting that was done? Is that available for public to look at? And also, I would like to know is with the coordination, and I know that in sometimes with these coordinations with federal agencies, there is a public entity is allowed to participate. When and if has the public been invited to participate? Besides this, where has the public been invited to participate? For instance, when you're talking to the Park Service, is the public also being talked to at the same time?
Christina, do you want to speak to the coordination? And I don't think Ethan's on the call. Maybe just some of the
So coordination with the Park Service is conducted under NEPA. They are a participating agency on the NEPA document. It's done under Section 106 of the
It's under the act, okay.
Yeah. And because we would put, you know, we were originally proposing as one of our alternatives to put a wall on Park Service lands. I mean, we have to talk to them about that.
Right. Yeah.
So
they're going to have to, yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
there was, you know, there was meetings between the Corps and the Park Service.
Right.
Early on, the public was not involved in those meetings. We do have meeting minutes. And Amber, I don't know if we can share those meeting minutes with the public, but
under under NEPA coming up at some point, you're going to need to do some evaluations similar, because you're going to do full 106 or you're going to absorb it under your NEPA. And you've mentioned in this document that you're going to do a programmatic or MOA or PA, and the public needs to be available for as a full partner. And I wonder when that is going to occur.
I am not sure on that. We would have to talk to our archaeologist, Ethan, who is coordinating that Section 106 coordination. So I am not sure if it, like you're saying, if the public is involved in that.
Well, no, the law says in NEPA, if you're creating a programmatic agreement, the public, if the public has an interest to be an interested consulted party, they're allowed.
Okay.
As well
yes,
as
I
the
can
state,
definitely,
as well as the state, and you know, and if there's if there is a Native American tribe around here, they have to be involved as well. So there are and it's called interested parties, and the public can be considered an interested party.
Okay. Yeah, I did not know about the public being a consulting party on that, but
They can if they request it.
Okay, I can definitely pass that on to our archaeologist and let him know that you guys, the public, is interested. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I wrote that comment down, Christine, and I will send an email to Ethan. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And we're actually going to shift gears just a little, and there's a few raised hands. I'd like to take on a couple of those, and then we will go right back to questions that we have in our chat function. Is Powell Hurdle on the line? And would you like to speak up, sir?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
One of the things is I'm going to speak for the preservation of the intent and memorial intent of the George Washington Memorial Parkway. It dates back to 1887, and when it was actually proposed, and people talked about having to make this patriotic pilgrimage to Mount Vernon. And it was enshrined in the Macmillan Report of 1900, which they talked about the Memorial Parkway should be created not for transport, but for vistas. And so that when one drove through, one could experience and contemplative process as one went down there, as one viewed the Potomac. And for instance, in adhering to that, the city of Alexandria has adopted very strict standards for what can be done on Washington Street to preserve that intent. And as such, it was enacted in 1924, adopted in 1928, and it serves a very specific purpose. A very specific purpose that enshrines the father of our country in the memory of people. And it is important to remember how important and significant George Washington was to the nation, even after his death in the early 1800s, when one did as they termed it, undertake this patriotic pilgrimage. And they built the road, and they built a parkway to memorialize that. And therefore, it is not just willy-nilly to put barriers and things that are incongruent with that on the parkway. I would say that the rendering that you have done, and I know it's just a rendering, so it's just preliminary, is of a brick wall, which also is not consistent or congruent with it. If a barrier is to be built, it needs to be consistent with, and for instance, what they use is the rock bridge that is on the parkway as an example of the material that would be appropriate for it. But overall, and the significance of it, and how it has singularly tied Washington, D.C. to George Washington's home should not be forgotten in this process. That is one thing. And secondly, I would strongly urge that the date for comments be extended simply because I just came across this purely by accident. So it's I believe it's been very difficult for people to find this. Thirdly, it was mentioned, and I'll mention this, it has not transpired this year, but last year we were practically washed out here from rainfall. And so the internal drainage should not be underestimated because that has been significant. Not so much this year, but previous years has been very significant. And lastly, I'll end it with this and say that a lot of people tend to view the George Washington Memorial Parkway as just a throughway. It's not. It is there and it exists because so many people fought very hard to preserve it. And that's why I strongly agree with the National Park Service's position on this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And we'll skip on to Catherine Ward. Are you online and would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. I've got several questions and I'm going to get into the weeds. Looking at the plan you have, I'm very concerned that the businesses on Bellhaven Road were never communicated with. And I know that for a fact because most of them are friends of mine and I've asked them if they knew about this and they said absolutely not. So you need to be speaking to them directly. The other thing is, as was mentioned earlier, we have a sewerage problem because of the water table and the basic infrastructure of the sewers in and around that area. What is your pumping station going to collect and where is it going to pump out? That's one question. The other question is, since where your wall is intended to be, it is my understanding that you will be destroying a large number of very mature trees. You will be putting your wall right in front of people's homes and windows. And I would assume at that juncture, you're going to be doing eminent domain. If you're not doing eminent domain, who is? And where's the money going to come from to pay for that? So those are my basic questions. And I'll go silent so you can answer them. Thank you.
I can answer. This is Dan Lovett. I can explain to you how the pump stations work. Basically, the pump stations are placed at those two creeks, the main two creeks that come out there. Once the level on the other side of the wall gets to a certain level and the water is no longer able to drain out, these pumps turn on and they pump the water over the wall to get to the other side. I hope that answers the one question.
Well, it does, but let me interrupt. The water there and what happened with Isabel, it's loaded with sewage. So do I hear you telling me you're going to hold the sewage and at some point you're going to pump it back out on the other side of the wall? So now it's going to go into Dyke Marsh? Is that what I'm hearing you tell me?
Yes, whatever's in the water, yes, we'll be pumping over to the other side because
Oh, great.
it's,
Well, I just certainly hope the environmentalists are hearing you that you're going to put shit into the Dyke Marsh area. Thank you. But
The water, the ground would be flooded at time by that time. There would be much inundation of the Potomac River already. It's not going to be dumped onto land so that erosion would happen. We're already going to have several feet of water there. And it's just going from one side of the wall to the other side of the wall.
also
thank
to
you.
note on
Please,
this point,
please answer the cost. Yeah, please answer my question about cost, please.
Craig, can you speak for the real estate and how that's obtained for construction?
Yes, under a cost-shared agreement, the non-federal sponsor, whom for the specific areas it could be different, you know, whatever local government, whether county or city or what, they are responsible for providing all of the lands, easements, and rights of way as prescribed by the whatever design, final design we come up with. So they would be responsible for performing the acquisition and which includes, you know, the appraisals and offers, negotiations, and ultimately eminent domain, as you pointed out. And they would also pay that cost, which they pay a share of the cost. It's called a cost share. They pay a percentage, and whatever cash or whatever they pay for the real estate is credited toward their share of the project construction cost.
Okay, well, thank you for that. But my now follow-on question, if I might.
Sure.
Have you all sat down with the Board of Supervisors of Fairfax County and informed them that they're going to have to come up with all this money? Because it's taxpayers' dollars, and that means us. And I don't believe you've had that conversation with these folks, and I don't think they understand what you're recommending. So when do you intend to share that with them?
So Craig, if I can take that question. So you, ma'am, you are correct. For this feasibility study, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments is our cost shared sponsor. And so at the time that if the plan continues to move forward, and it is likely that if a project was to move to design, that Fairfax County would be our cost share sponsor for that portion, then at that time we would continue that coordination. But our direct coordination, as Katie mentioned during the presentation, is with the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, since that's who signed the feasibility cost share agreement. So those conversations have not yet happened, and we're just that's where how we're coordinating for the feasibility phase. We have
Thank you very
engaged.
much.
Sure, we have engaged Arlington County and Fairfax County since these plans moved to the tentatively selected plan phase. So we're starting those conversations, but we're still very early in the study. Thank you.
Okay, may I ask you who you're speaking to in Fairfax County, please?
Yes, I believe our main point of contact is Craig Sorensi, and I believe he is on the call.
And what office do you work in, Craig?
Yes, this is Craig Carenzi. Yes, I work in our Stormwater Planning Division, part of the Department of Public Works and Environmental Services.
Okay, you better be talking to Supervisor Stork and Chairman McKay about the costs that they may be incurring on your behalf and our behalf, please.
Yeah,
Don't wait till the last minute.
Yeah, we coordinate very closely with our elected officials.
Thank you. Moving on, just again, in the interest of time, Michael Began, are you on the line and would you like to speak up at this time?
Yes, please. I have two questions. First, how high will the walls be behind the 31 building and the 21 building? Second question, what happens to the land on the other side of the wall? I mean, will residents have access to it?
Dan or Andy, do you want to take the question for the height of the structure?
Yeah, there will be one closure for the sidewalk. So there would be access to the back, but you know, it might take you a long way to get around it. There will also be a closure at the dock, loading dock. So you would also have access there as well. So anytime where there's a closure, you can get around to the other side of the wall. Do you want, can you repeat the other question that you had?
Yeah, well, okay, how high would the wall be? And also, who would own that property?
The owner of the, I will let real estate answer this, but essentially it becomes whoever the local sponsor is. We will only have an easement to go on there, but the property will be owned by the local sponsor. The height of the levee varies from location to location because the existing ground changes from spot to spot. But if I remember correctly, roughly around these condo areas, you guys are a little bit higher than the other ones. And I think yours is roughly around 3 feet.
Hey, Dan, as far as the property ownership, the actual owner of the property would remain unchanged. The local sponsor would obtain the easement, and the easement would just offer the core access. Just to clarify that a little bit.
Yeah. Thank you, Andy. Sorry.
I believe that was it for our raised hand. So back to our chat function. Let's see here. Ms. Mala, I believe we answered your question. Alexis Abernathy, have we gotten to you? Ma'am, are you on the line, or sir? Okay, moving on. Dan, I believe we've had you speak up a few times. Has this portion of this already been answered, or would you like to speak back up?
Dan Lovett is on our team, so you're going to see him addressing comments in the chat.
Okay. Let's see here. Let's keep moving down. Same with Grace. Grace, I believe we've had you speak up a few times. Has this already been addressed?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Ms. Kalindi Corrins, has your question been addressed, or would you like to speak up at this time? Give her a minute in case there is a mute issue. Okay, moving on. And I believe we've had River Towers speak up. Did we address everything here for those at the condominiums? Okay. I believe that is everything that we have in the chat. Let me go back to hands and make sure we haven't missed anything. I do not believe I see any more raised hands. Sir Paul Hurdle, I see your hand raised. Is that from your previous question?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry.
Okay. No worries. No worries. Is there anyone else before we end the meeting that would like to speak up? Any last minute, either chat questions, or you're welcome to raise your hand. Ms. Kalindi Corrins, I believe I see your hand. Are you there? Would you like to speak up? if for whatever reason you're having difficulty speaking up, you're more than welcome to use the chat function and I can read your question on, out to everyone, to the team. As of now, you are showing you are on mute, although I did see your hand pop up. Okay. Oh, we just had something. Okay, your question has not been answered. Ma'am, what is your, I'm going to scroll back up here. Would you like me to read this out loud? Let's see here. Okay. At Tuesday's meeting, we were advised to contact Commonwealth of Virginia congressional officials to request that MPS come to the table and discuss more inclusive plans. Please advise. Is there anybody on the team who would like to?
Craig, I'm wondering if you, Craig Sorensi, I'm wondering if you might be able to address that question. I believe that was a request from Fairfax or maybe one of the other partners.
Hi, this is Christine Morin from Supervisor Stork's office. I'm happy to take that if it helps. At Tuesday night's meeting, the in-person meeting, there were representatives there from Congressman Don Byers' office, as well as Senator Mark Warner's office, and they indicated the majority of this is in their districts. And so there were a lot of conversations from community members about reaching out to them to have further discussions about in getting the National Park Service to the table to talk about opportunities of considering the east side of the GW Parkway. Because I missed the first part of the meeting, but I'm sure you went through how you're not looking at that side, you're looking at the other side adjacent to adjacent to personal property. So folks were encouraged by multiple people to reach out to their elected officials, especially at the congressional level, to advocate for that. I will say that Supervisor Stork's already reached out to Congressman Don Byer to have that conversation with him as well, and we'll be doing that advocacy as well.
Thank you for that clarification. And we did have another hand pop up. It's initials JH. Would you like to speak up at this time?
Yes, actually, just a technical consideration. I don't know if Teams was the only option for this meeting, but it seemed to be the case. And frankly, although I use Teams for work on, government computer, I didn't have it on my phone, and it was actually surprisingly difficult to install. I would just ask that, given the type of population we have here in Bellevue, and I don't know about other local residents, you please consider an easier, more convenient app, or however you want to do it. More people probably have Zoom or something else, if that's a possibility. Just that. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback, sir. We'll certainly take that into consideration. Is there anyone else? I don't see any more raised hands at this point.
Cynthia,
And I believe, yes.
It looks like, this is Amber, it looks like Kalindi Corrins is off of mute. Do we want to give her just one more chance to speak up?
Yes, ma'am, please. The mic is yours. Ms. Corrins, would you like to speak up? I'll give you a few seconds here. And I believe I just saw something pop up in the chat. Let's see. Okay, Catherine, let's see here. What is the best way to get those questions to you before they provide official comments? Can they get answers?
Cynthia, we have the project email up on the screen. So I would say please feel free to reach out using the email. I know we've also been in close coordination with Fairfax County. And since this is a virtual meeting, we don't have comment cards that we can hand out. But I believe one of the questions that came up at Tuesday's meeting was, will the comment cards be available on the website? So we could also do it that way if people prefer to mail in their comments instead of email. Thank you.
Thank you all. I apologize. I believe I had a lapse in my own connection there for a little bit. Is there anyone else who has anything, comments, questions before we disconnect and for the evening? Okay, wonderful. Once again, thank you for joining us. As Amber just mentioned, your project website is currently up on your screen, as well as the project email. You are more than welcome to go ahead and send comments there. And if there is anything else, please feel free to use that same email address to be able to contact anyone that is on the team if you have any specific questions that you would like clarification on. And thank you once again. And unless the team has anything to add, I believe that that is it for the evening.
Thank you, Cynthia. And is there a way to capture all of the comments and discussion in the chat so we have that for the record?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to comment. We really appreciate the honesty and the information that you've provided.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for your time.